Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's going on, Fantasy Champs? Welcome back to the podcast. We're glad to have you. My name is Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me, as always. What's poppin', Rick?
How you doing?
Doing great. Hopefully you guys checked out our last episode. Somewhere on the YouTube screen, it'll pop up. It'll say, hey, listen, we did a mock draft. You should probably watch it. It was in half PPR 12 teams, so if you want to see what that looked like, and tell us in the comments who won that mock draft. I think I did, not going to lie.
Yeah, I think Rick won.
I think Rick won. So anyway, we're glad to have you back in. Today we're going to talk about our top 6 quarterbacks for fantasy football. We got another ranking show coming at you. And so this time we will do 3 and 3 in groups. Remember we did 4 3 times. Now we're only going to do 3 once and then 3 again. And we're good. If that makes any sense. But anyway, yeah, we're going to talk about our top 6 quarterbacks and who you should be drafting. Lots of guys that should be mentioned that don't fall into the group. So it'll be interesting. Usually we talk about our top 10 guys because, you know, there's more than 6 people in your league. But we'll just talk about our top 6 quarterbacks here. Before we do that, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Just type our name in, you'll find us, the FF Champs, Fantasy Champions. If you were listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcasting platforms, leave a review, share this pod with your friends, do the good work, help us out. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, like, and comment down below. Like I said, you ready to do the top quarterbacks, Rick?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now that we got the intro done in about, 2 minutes flat.
You fly through it.
Yeah. So yeah, we're going to talk about these top quarterbacks. If you haven't been here before and you didn't understand what I was just saying, Rick and I break down the show, our ranks into groups, and then discuss the differences. So it's not an average or it's not confusing. It's just us talking about our personal top 6s for the quarterback position. Anyway, well, let's jump into the top quarterbacks. And enough of me talking. Rick, why don't you give your first 3 first?
Yeah, it's funny. My projections, I have all 3 of these guys separated by 5 fantasy points. So extremely similar. To be honest, I'm okay with taking the 3rd guy. If I was going to take a quarterback early, I'd be fine with taking the 3rd who's available. But for me, it's Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, 1, 2, 3.
Okay. Why?
So I originally had Josh Allen at 1. I kind of am getting a little nervous with his receivers. Yeah. That made me kind of second guess it, and I put him at 2. He's still going to be great. Not just with his passing, but with his rushing, which is the reason he has been QB1 consecutive seasons. I just think, if his receiving play is bad, it might hinder his passing enough where he ends up being QB2. And I think the next guy up would be Jalen Hurts, who has been creeping at that QB1 spot. He's QB3 in 2022, QB2 last year. And now, I know they lost Jason Kelce, but it might be the best offense that he's ever had. Mm-hmm. The line did take a slight hit, but you have A.J. Brown on one side, Devontae Smith on the other, and Saquon in the backfield. Like, that is a leap. And they arguably have the best offensive weapons in the NFL. That, like, those 3 go up against anybody. Maybe like San Francisco with McCaffrey, Kittle, and Debo and Ayuk. And you can throw Dallas Goedert in there, who's a really, really good tight end. So he's got all the weapons. He's been knocking at the door for a couple of years. So that's why I'd put him at QB1. Josh Allen's still elite. QB2, again, just some slight concerns with receivers, where I don't know how good his passing numbers will be this year. Because if he throws like 30-plus touchdowns with that receiving group, it's going to be kind of insane. And then Patrick Mahomes, I have at 3. He's going at 3 or 4 in a lot of drafts. I think we've kind of taken a step back with him because he did have a down year last year. But in 2022, he was the QB1, threw 5,200 yards and 41 touchdowns. I think that's in play again this year. I think he had a step down last year with his receivers. This year, you bring in Xavier Worthy in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
You have Rashee Rice for a full season, not getting suspended, and they signed Hollywood Brown. His receiving core is a lot better than last year. I think he's getting underlooked because I think he can have another season like he did in the previous year. So I think QB1 is in play for Mahomes, but I have him at QB3.
Okay. Okay, my top three: Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson.
There you go.
I left Patrick Mahomes out of my top three, but you make very valid points on Mahomes. Where did he finish last year?
It wasn't great. It was QB8.
Oh,
but he did miss a game.
Nice. Maybe I should rank him a little higher.
But the year before that, he was QB1.
It's like up, down, up, down, up, down. And he does have a better receiving core. But we'll get to Patrick Mahomes for me in a second. My top three, like I said, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson. There's a constant and consistent theme with these three guys. And it's rushing.
Yep.
Josh Allen rushes. Jalen Hurts rushes. Lamar Jackson rushes. I do have my hesitations on two out of the three guys. Which maybe would lead me to do the same thing that you did and move Jalen Hurts up to number one. I've thought about that a little bit.
Okay.
Even some of the things that you mentioned. But Josh Allen's number one for me because at the end of every year, he just seems to always end up being the quarterback one.
Yep.
And
so we have the last 4 years, he's QB1.
To me, even if he doesn't end up the QB1 in fantasy football, he'll be like top three. So like what you're getting is not really a downgrade either way. And it's better to have that guy. It is also far easier to stack his weapons if you want to draft Keon Coleman in the 9th round. If you feel like doing that. Or Dalton Kincaid. That could be a deadly stack as well. But either way, I think Josh Allen will be fine this year. He did lose Stephon Diggs, but there were stretches of times where Stephon Diggs either he didn't really get hurt too much, but he just vanished. And Josh Allen still had really great weeks. So I don't think him not having Stephon Diggs really matters. Nothing really else changed on the football team besides Diggs leaving. And if Keon Coleman ends up working out, I think Josh Allen's kind of in the same spot as he was before. So he'll end up being a top three guy anyway. But there is that concern for me where he's got that piss poor receiving core, and it's not looking good over there for the.
They're relying a lot on Keon Coleman being good right off the jump.
Yep. So that is concerning, but it also could be really good. And if Keon Coleman ends up working out, bro, that Josh Allen, Keon Coleman stack could win leagues at the end of the year. Not saying that's going to happen, but yeah, if you want to do something like that. Jalen Hurts is number two. Jalen Hurts, man. He just between the tush push, the rushing, and the ridiculous weapons he has everywhere on the field, he's always going to be a top quarterback in fantasy football, and I think he'll probably finish 3 to 5 this year, or 2 to 5 this year, and could finish realistically as the QB1 if things keep going that way. But he is another rushing quarterback that I tend to like. If you can pass it a little bit and rush, he'll be on the top of my list.
It's a recipe for success in fantasy football.
And then Lamar. Boom or bust, Lamar Jackson. I'd like to see a little bit more consistency out of Lamar for me to draft him as high as it costs to draft Lamar Jackson. Like what I'm finding myself doing in a lot of leagues is like, I'm okay with taking Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts high if I want to go that route. But like I have been in drafts avoiding Lamar. Not necessarily in the context that I don't want to draft him because I love having Lamar on my team. It's just more or less one of those situations where it's like, I don't really draft quarterbacks high, and he does have a lot of he has some concerns for me in terms of his explosive situation. So a guy in our league had him last year, won the championship, got 41 points in the championship game, but 2 weeks prior he was lucky to have a bye week because Lamar had 8. So it was just the dude legitimately is boom or bust, and you have to watch out and understand that with Lamar. But once he gets going, he goes on a stretch.
Yeah,
you're going to win a lot of games. So Lamar is top 3 for that reason. I think he'll end top 5, 3 to 5 at the end of the season. I don't think he can be QB1 this year, but yeah. So that's my top 3. Give your last 3, Rick.
So I had Lamar at 4, still in that same tier as those other guys, and then I had A. Rich at 5 and CJ Stroud at 6. My thing with Lamar is He's coming off an MVP season, which, by the way, I don't want to rag on Lamar, but that might be one of the worst MVP seasons I've ever seen. 24 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 3,600 yards passing. It's kind of mid for an MVP. I know he had the rushing, 800 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns, but still. Like Josh Allen had like 38 touchdowns and like 10 rushing touchdowns a couple of years ago and didn't win MVPs. So, I don't know. It's kind of weird MVP year, but he did win it. Had a really good year. He has been hurt though every single year of his career. He's missed at least one game. Last year he wasn't hurt. They sat him out in week 18, I think. So that's why he missed a game. Mm-hmm. But in 2022 and 2021, he missed 4 games each. There's just a little bit too many injury concerns with me with Lamar. At number 5, I have Anthony Richardson, who this is a little bit of a risky pick, but again, his rushing upside is just way, way too good. He could be like Fields last year, who ended up being a bust, but I'm willing to take that chance because he has a really good receiving core. Like A.D. Mitchell is a beast. Shouldn't have been drafted where he was. He probably should have been like a late first-round pick that they got in the second round. Michael Pittman is good. Josh Downs is good. Even Alex Pierce is like a depth receiver is really good. You got Jonathan Taylor, so he's got weapons around him. And last year in the limited action we saw, he played in 4 games. In one of those games, he got injured. Actually, I think he got injured in 2 games because he only played a half in the second and 5th game of the season. So in like 2.5 games, basically, he had 4 rushing touchdowns.
That's wild.
And 3 passing touchdowns. So like he feels like when he's on the field, he's going to be a fantasy cheat code. I think in my projections, I actually had him as the same as Lamar. They were only separated by 1 fantasy point. So I think if he's healthy and he's on the field and he's playing to the level he's capable of, he's going to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback, a lock, because of that rushing. Yep. And that's what we usually look for. There is some concern with him, though. He's probably the riskiest guy on this list. And then number 6, my last guy is C.J. Stroud. Doesn't have the rushing, so he has to have a really good season. But I think he's very capable of it. He had one of the best rookie seasons of all time last year. Threw 4,100 yards in 15 games as a rookie. That's pretty ridiculous. And they added Stephon Diggs to his receiver core. I mean, he's got Tank Dell, Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs. That's a ridiculous 3-man wide receiver group. And he was QB 11 last year as a rookie in 15 games. So I think in a full second season under his belt with that receiving core, he's in line to have a very, very good year.
Okay. Yeah, I like it. I was clicked into another tab and I'm trying to find my rankings. So yeah, all fair points. My final 4 here, or my final 3 here are Patrick Mahomes, Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud. So Rick have the same 5 and 6. So no argument there, bud. But I think the main swap we have here, you have Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen swapped, and I have Lamar and Patrick Mahomes. So we can discuss that maybe at the end. But I think for me, like I said, Mahomes is just like he does have a lot of weapons, so that is the case. But like for a guy like Patrick Mahomes to have a massive fantasy season, he's got to throw in the vicinity of 35 to 40 touchdowns, which not unlikely. But if he has a QB1 like season, he's got to be between 40 and 45 in terms of touchdowns, just because he doesn't provide the rushing. And so that is possible for him. The question is, does it happen? It seemed last year, and this was probably because they didn't have explosive weapons on the team, realistically, but they shifted more to being a game control football team where they ran the ball and they took what they could get underneath. I don't know that that's going to fully change because once teams figure out that Worthy's really fast and can blow the top off the defense, they're going to give you what's underneath. So Mahomes will take it. He'll always take that crap every single day of the week. So he's going to be very good for fantasy football. And there is that ceiling of like, okay, he could be QB1, but I think he's 4 for me just because he doesn't provide a whole ton of rushing. And it's like his entire fantasy season has to be predicated on like his passing, which is why realistically, if you look over the course of Patrick Mahomes' career, it's been like QB1, QB8, QB1, QB5, 7, 8, 9. Like it just goes, it fluctuates. So it really depends on how the team plays. And if you're following the trend of Mahomes' career, this year might be the QB1 year, but he does have much better weapons this year, it seems, than last. But for Mahomes, I think being around 4 or 5 is probably a better guess or bet for him, especially when you have guys that can rush. And if those guys that can rush stay healthy, they're going to outscore him. Number 5 is Anthony Richardson to me. This one's tough because Home Dog has looked kind of like hot buns at times in camp in the preseason. He's inaccurate, and he launches the ball 5 million times, but this is all things he did in the regular season last year. Didn't seem to affect him.
Right.
So, I mean, he's going to run. He's going to score touchdowns.
He's going to throw interceptions.
He's going to have a freaking cannon for an arm, and he's going to get it to open guys like Josh Downs or Adonai Mitchell or Michael Pittman. And it's going to look really good. And I think getting Anthony Richardson, I just drafted him on the mock draft show, like getting Anthony Richardson on your team, not a bad idea, because I think he has, based on what we saw in the short window, like Rick said early last year, I think he has the explosive ability to be the number 1 quarterback in fantasy football. But for him to do that, he's got to look a little bit better than what he has been. So I think QB5 is probably a safe area to put him. That really puts him in the range of like the 6th round, probably 5th, 6th round. And so if that's the case, like I'll take that, because I think he has. I would say the only person that's a better rusher than him at quarterback in the top 5 is Lamar.
Yeah.
And Lamar's kind of like shifting his career to less running. So like there might be a situation where he can I think there's a chance if Richardson does well early in the season that he could be explosive. And then finally, CJ Stroud. Stroud was really good last year, and there is some love in my heart for CJ Stroud, but there's also the situation where he's similar to Patrick Mahomes, where like for him to excel, he's got to have really good passing numbers. And I've seen quarterbacks in the league go out and have elite year ones, get ranked really high, and then the second year kind of tail off a little bit. And because teams watch the film in the offseason, they figure players out and they watch them and they go, maybe I can do this. And then there's an adjustment period. So it really depends on how long the adjustment period is for Stroud. It happens to everyone. You look at Mahomes' year 1 from the first year he started full time. Yeah. He was a QB1. Second year, I remember we did a podcast and I said, it's going to be hard for Patrick Mahomes to throw 50 touchdowns again. And you laughed at me. And then that very year, I think he scored like 38 something. So and he was like the QB 8, 9, 10. So it's like this stuff happens to guys. And I think Stroud could face that this year, which is a little bit concerning for me. But I don't think it's, I'm not avoiding him in drafts because that is in my thought. So but I think I think he's going ahead of Richardson and some of those guys, right? Like he's going in the top 5.
Yeah.
I can't remember how high he's going.
I think it depends on your format, but in some formats he's going QB5.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of like out on drafting him that high, but
me too.
Yeah, so that's why Stroud's a little bit lower, and he might actually.
And to me, I don't know how you feel. I actually have Stroud in like Richardson. I have the top 4 in one tier. I would have Richardson in a tier by himself because he's kind of a wild card.
Yep.
And then I would have Stroud in the next tier of guys with like Kyler and Joe Burrow.
Sure. Yeah.
He's the top of that tier, but
yeah, so I think there is that concern. It's just based on history with quarterbacks where it's like the second year always tends to be this, unless they didn't start year 1.
Concerns.
But anyway, there's the quarterbacks. You have any more thoughts?
No.
Okay.
I think
all
that's
right.
it.
There you go. Mine are Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud. Rick's is Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud. Kind of sounds the same, but it wasn't.
Same 6 guys.
Thanks for listening to the show. We'll see you tomorrow, guys. Bye.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.